Hello, fellow delegates and observers of COP26. We bring you warm Caribbean greetings from our twin island state, Antigua and Barbuda, where the beach is just the beginning. As a small island developing state that is highly driven by tourism, our population of just about 100,000 people remains forever vulnerable, both economically and environmentally, to the negative effects of climate change. We are constantly faced with threats of record-breaking hurricanes, devastated flooding, prolonged drought conditions, and even increasing global temperatures that have given a rise to blooms of sargassum seaweed that overwhelm our coastline annually, all of which have forced business closures and increasing social hardship across our communities. However, this conversation we are having today isn't a new one, is it? Our leaders have been talking about ways to combat climate change for a number of years now, and as youth living in Antigua and Barbuda, we do recognize and continue to support our nation on the steps that we have and continue to take to combat climate change. We are very proud to be one of the first countries within our region to have banned plastic bags and styrofoam products. Additionally, our government has committed to reducing carbon emissions and promoting green practices within our society. While these initiatives are all great, we can and must do better, especially if we are serious about achieving the Sustainable Development Goals by 2030. So we wish to use this opportunity to not only call on our government, but all leaders around the world to prioritize climate education so more people can understand just how important climate action is needed and the ways in which we can all play our part by taking personal responsibility to act now for the future. Thank you.
Distinguidos delegados y observadores, hoy nos dirigimos a ustedes en representación de la Argentina, un país al sur de América Latina con una población de 45 millones de habitantes. Como país periférico, somos de los primeros en padecer las consecuencias de la crisis climática. Por la vulnerabilidad de la población, el país no está preparado para proteger a sus ciudadanos y la tierra de la crisis climática. Este año, las consecuencias de la crisis climática han sido devastadoras, sufriendo incendios masivos, productos de la expansión agropecuaria y las prolongadas sequías incrementadas por el cambio climático.
La realidad que estamos viviendo no es casual, es causal. Se extinguieron múltiples especies nativas a causa de los desmontes y cada vez son más los refugiados climáticos. La crisis climática también es social y son los más vulnerables los primeros en sufrir sus consecuencias. A pesar de la falta de interés de nuestros gobernantes, hay un sector que se mantuvo firme en cuanto a la toma de acción y la comunicación de urgencia socioambiental, la juventud, que hoy lidera los movimientos socioambientales en el país.
Debido al constante aumento de temperatura global, la crisis climática debe ser una prioridad incuestionable. Somos la generación que introdujo el debate climático en la agenda y la lucha no va a parar hasta que no consigamos nuestros objetivos. En el Acuerdo de París, los países se comprometieron a limitar el aumento de temperatura en 1,5 grados centígrados. Sin embargo, la propuesta de 2016 de Argentina dio vergüenza. Se otorgó la posibilidad de emitir en 2030 100 megatoneladas de dióxido de carbono equivalente por encima de lo que emitió en 2014. Para ponerlo en contexto, si todos los países hicieran lo mismo, para 2100 la temperatura aumentaría en más de 4 grados centígrados.
Próximamente, Argentina deberá presentar nuevos compromisos y avances. Para cumplir con el Acuerdo de París, les exigimos a nuestros representantes nacionales una transición energética para dejar de depender de los combustibles fósiles, replantear nuestro sistema de producción de alimentos, apuntando hacia una producción y consumo local y estacional libre de agrotóxicos, que se legislen y se cumplan las leyes ambientales que protejan a los habitantes, que ordenen el territorio y regulen el uso de suelo.
Necesitamos que los países desarrollados, los mayores emisores de gases de efecto invernadero y los líderes mundiales nos ayuden económicamente para estar en línea con el Acuerdo de París y para poder adaptarnos a los impactos que hay en nuestro país. Estamos viendo y viviendo los efectos de la crisis climática. Exigimos a todos los gobiernos del mundo que actúen en pos de revertir y mitigar los efectos que esta crisis trae. Dejen de decirnos a los jóvenes que somos el futuro. El momento de actuar es ya, porque si no, no tendremos un futuro que proteger.
Good day to all distinguished delegates and viewers of MOC COP26. I, Leandria Albury, alongside my co-delegate, Kenrisha Price, are delighted to join you all here today in this initiative for the youth, by the youth, to highlight the ongoing global climate crisis, an issue we are both very passionate about. We are ecstatic to be a part of this event and are proud representatives of the beautiful sunny isles of the Bahamas. Our voices are lifted in unison today to speak on behalf of the youth of the Bahamas, an archipelagic nation of over 700 beautiful islands and 2,000 keys with a population of approximately 400,000.
The Bahamas, as a small island developing state, faces a host of infrastructural challenges that are heightened by our climate issues. Although we contribute to less than 1% of the world's greenhouse gas emissions, our geographical location and makeup, as well as our small land mass, causes us to face the brunt of climate problems caused by global warming. Bahamians grapple constantly with the threat of land mass loss due to increased sea temperatures that melt ice caps and raise sea levels, which causes land regression of our low-lying islands. Conversely, increased frequency of intense hurricanes in our yearly hurricane seasons threaten our livelihood by destroying our already fragile ecosystems. These intense tropical cyclones, such as Hurricane Dorian, leave a path of destructions that we, the Bahamian people, constantly have to fight against to secure our economics and social well-being.
Staring down the barrel of a stark environmental future, the youth of our nation have begun to rally together to usher in the dawn of a sustainable Bahama land. They have undertaken many initiatives to meet this target. This includes starting projects such as the 100,000 tree planting initiative, which aims to sequester our carbon emissions. Additionally, individual schools within the Bahamas have begun to adopt climate education curriculums on the advice of students of these institutions. These curriculums allow schools to build in organizations, clubs, and groups which are a part of spreading educational awareness on the urgent matters of the climate crisis, protection and reformation of ecosystems, sustainable living, and climate justice. Finally, as seen here with myself and Kenrisha, there are many Bahamian youth, too numerous to mention, that are putting themselves front and center in the development of critical climate policy, a forum where youth were once shut out.
Though we, the youth of the Bahamas, have come a long way in tackling climate-related issues, there is still a long road ahead of us before we see substantial change within our country's actions. Today, we are here to share with you some of the changes we'd like to see implemented in the Bahamas in order to see the radical change needed to secure our future. We would like to see the Bahamian government increase its involvement in raising awareness of climate crisis, promote local research and data collection around the effects of climate change, and reevaluate our current climate policies to ensure that they are on track to achieve outlined goals.
As youth of the Great Bahama Land, who are already being affected by climate change through sea level rise, an increase in natural disasters, and overall temperature rise, we are urging our government to take immediate action and address the areas mentioned above. We feel the consequences of your action or inaction will be a great determinant to how effective the Bahamas' response to climate change will be. We have outlined some realistic and science-based actions that would greatly improve our nation and allow us to continually move forward, upward, onward together. Thank you.
Greetings, distinguished delegates and observers of the MOC COP26. We speak to you today representing the youths of Belize, a small developing country in the Central American region, sharing borders with Mexico, Guatemala, and the Caribbean Sea. Our population of over 400,000 is a rich combination of cultures that span across our humble 8,867 square miles, with a 60% forest cover, the largest within Central America and the Caribbean. Belize has a subtropical climate with wet and dry seasons, and temperatures range from 74 to 84 degrees Fahrenheit. Despite yearly variability in weather, changes imposed by climate change is altering weather patterns. Given our geographic location, we are directly exposed to the imminent threats of climate change. Considered one of the most affected by weather-related events, further global contributions to climate change can quickly escalate the effects of climate and disrupt the environmental, social, and economical aspects of our nation. Presently, the hurricane season is catastrophically active. Belize, although not directly impacted, is on the verge of enduring surreal effects. The cataclysmic flooding has led to the displacement of people and livestock and caused extensive damage to infrastructure, altogether displaying the fragility of our country when Mother Earth retaliates against injustice being imposed upon her.
Upon contemplating what our future holds, with the elevated impacts of climate change, Belize is expected to suffer major losses in its agriculture, fisheries, and tourism industries. The present and the future of our local farmers, fishermen, and people who are dependent on these sectors are now uncertain. From a holistic approach, the climate change has impeded the development of the social, economic, and environmental sectors. In light of the effects of climate change, limited action is being undertaken to effectively mitigate and build resilience. The government alone cannot overcome this humongous threat. As such, many youths have taken the torch to bring awareness to the issue and recruit others to aid in the battle of environmental justice. However, it is crucial that unwavering support and meaningful dedication be expected from the local, private, state, and international partners to ensure that the foundation of these initiatives are firmly set to adapt and mitigate climate change.
What young people want leaders do to combat climate change crisis is to revamp the following resilient mechanism. 1. Education awareness programs. 2. Financial funding. 3. Stringent policy. Implementing strategic policies that will monitor our carbon stock emission whilst enforcing law that regulates the emission. It is our desire as youth that leaders safeguard the place we call home. To feel safe that our future are amongst the highest priorities of the state. Finally, we ask that leaders be consistent with the overall growth and sustainable development of our country. The Belizean population is equivalent to only 0.01% of the total world population. Comparing geographic size, Belize, a small country with relatively minor contributions to global greenhouse gas emissions, has a lot to lose. As we grasp the surreal reality of climate change, we must demand change and hold all countries accountable to their policies for lowering their GHG emissions. Ultimately, on behalf of the Belizean young people, we ask all world leaders to cease political gain, individualism, and exploitation of our natural resource for economic gain, and understand the severity of the issue, and work together for a brighter and sustainable future. After all, you owe us this much. Thank you.
Distinguidas delegadas y observadores de la COP26, hoy hablamos en representación de las juventudes de Bolivia, un país situado en el corazón de Sudamérica, que debido a su topografía accidentada, alberga importantes, complejos y delicados ecosistemas, caracterizados por su mega biodiversidad. Bolivia, históricamente, es uno de los países que en términos de emisiones tiene una responsabilidad muy baja. Sin embargo, es el segundo más vulnerable de la región y el quinto menos preparado para enfrentar y reparar los daños y pérdidas del cambio climático, reflejado en su incapacidad de gestionar desastres naturales como los incendios en tierras bajas. Sin embargo, en nombre del derecho al desarrollo, las políticas de crecimiento económico, el urbanismo, así como la expansión de la frontera agrícola y ganadera, han ocasionado que el modelo de desarrollo del Estado boliviano se plantee abiertamente extractivista.
Como consecuencia, la gestión de los ecosistemas es pésima, reflejándose en procesos agresivos de sobreexplotación y una alarmante deforestación. Por otro lado, estas prácticas extractivistas que contaminan y consumen absurdas cantidades de agua tienen efectos en el proceso de regeneración de lluvias en la región. Hay evidencia científica que afirma que la época de lluvias va a empezar más tarde y durará cada vez menos, incrementando no solo el estrés hídrico, sino también eventos climáticos extremos, afectando a 2/3 de la población, sino a la totalidad del país. Los esfuerzos para tomar acciones por el clima desde la juventud en Bolivia son dispersos, tanto por la etapa de consolidación y la heterogeneidad de los sectores que la conforman. No obstante, uno de los grandes hitos a nivel nacional fue la primera LCOI, que abrió un espacio independiente a más de 700 jóvenes. El reto que enfrentamos es la inclusión de sectores más vulnerables y menos representados, como pueblos indígenas y comunidades rurales, quienes muy pocas veces tienen la oportunidad de participar y levantar la voz para avanzar hacia una transición justa e incluyente.
En muchas ocasiones, las políticas de desarrollo boliviana muestran una total desconexión con su sociedad y la evidencia científica disponible. Las resoluciones consensuadas durante la LCOI reflejaron la preocupación por impulsar un cambio en la matriz productiva y buscar alternativas a la dependencia de la extracción de minerales e hidrocarburos, proporcionar información periódica y más transparente respecto a las metodologías de cuantificación de emisiones de gases de efecto invernadero, apoyar e incentivar e incluir el trabajo de la comunidad científica, de la sociedad civil y sectores vulnerables en la toma de decisiones. Y por último, generar espacios de participación para la incidencia nacional e internacional de los jóvenes. Bolivia, a pesar de no ser un país históricamente responsable de las emisiones causantes de la crisis climática, tiene la responsabilidad de iniciar un proceso de transición justa para conservar y proteger especialmente sus frágiles ecosistemas y proteger a su población más vulnerable. Como jóvenes, reclamamos acciones más contundentes y ser incluídas de manera más eficaz.
Representantes e observadores da COP26. Nós falamos aqui como representantes da juventude brasileira. Localizado no sul global, é lar de 6 biomas e mais de 305 etnias indígenas. A crise climática no Brasil é causada principalmente pela degradação dos biomas e pela falta de políticas socioambientais alinhadas com a natureza, com as demandas populares e com as metas definidas para freá-la. No setor energético, há pouco investimento em energias limpas e renováveis, com grandes incentivos ao setor de combustíveis fósseis e hidrelétricas, que geram alto custo ambiental. O setor agropecuário é baseado em latifúndios de monoculturas para exportação, muitas vezes realizados em terras públicas e territórios tradicionais grilados, gerando grandes conflitos por terra. As mudanças de uso da terra, puxadas pelo desmatamento e pela agropecuária, seguem sendo os principais responsáveis pelas emissões no Brasil, com 72% do total.
A descrença do atual governo na ciência e nas mudanças climáticas, somada ao desmonte da área ambiental, diminuição do Ministério do Meio Ambiente e fiscalização, teve por consequência o aumento de 9,6% das emissões brutas de gases de efeito estufa do Brasil em 2019, investindo em medidas que vão contra o Acordo de Paris e as contribuições nacionalmente determinadas. A juventude brasileira é e sempre foi sinônimo de resistência. Em todo o país, nos reunimos em grupos com visões plurais que atacam a crise climática e suas injustiças com recortes sociais, lutando contra um governo que insiste em validar nossas vozes em discussões e locais de tomada de decisão. O racismo ambiental ultrapassa o cenário rural e invade o urbano, afetando populações minoritárias de maneira desproporcional, desumana e inconstitucional. Acreditamos que não existe justiça ambiental sem justiça social e que não é possível separar uma luta da outra.
Assim, os líderes nacionais devem buscar implementar leis, investimentos e políticas públicas que possam realmente combater a crise socioambiental que estamos vivendo. No campo, queremos produções de pequeno e médio porte, agroecológicas e de baixo carbono, que respeitem a diversidade de sementes nativas e a preservação do solo e promovam a segurança e a soberania alimentar dos povos. Nas cidades, queremos a implementação de educação ambiental nas redes públicas e privadas, projetos de urbanização justa com moradia segura e saneamento básico universal, hortas urbanas, feiras populares e alimentação escolar saudável. Nas indústrias, queremos os poluidores responsabilizados através de uma regulamentação mais dura, multas e impostos de acordo com seu consumo de carbono, devendo este valor ser retornado ao país em forma de fundo de preservação e mitigação dos danos ambientais e um setor energético que invista em energia solar e eólica.
Queremos biomas preservados e restaurados, retomada das terras públicas, demarcação dos territórios indígenas e tradicionais, aumento das áreas de preservação e reflorestamento com créditos de carbono para uma economia das florestas em pé. Em relação aos líderes mundiais, não queremos só palavras bonitas e promessas, queremos ação. Queremos que líderes dos países mais desenvolvidos pensem nas regiões mais afetadas e não apenas em si mesmos, reconhecendo seu papel para garantir um mundo com menos divisão entre norte e sul global. Assim, queremos que vozes da diversidade sejam ouvidas, para então podermos fazer um progresso sustentável. Sendo uma juventude de luta, não aceitamos o discurso de que somos o futuro. Somos cidadãos ativos hoje e representamos a luta do presente para que sequer haja um futuro.
Hello.
My name is Abigail Stees.
My name is Sophie Price.
My name is Jamie Hunter.
Today we represent the youth of Canada in the fight for climate justice.
Here in Canada, our country is warming at twice the rate of the global average and 3 times the global average in northern Canada.
On average, wildfires in Canada burn 2.5 million hectares a year, which is double the amount from the 1970s.
The ice melting incredibly fast in northern Canada can be blamed on the land surface temperature increasing by 3.6 degrees in the last 70 years.
Although these disasters affect all Canadians, the majority of the impact is felt by marginalized communities, specifically Indigenous people.
Since 2018, there have been a huge number of student climate strikes in Canada, with the largest happening in September 2019, when over 900,000 people participated. Strikes took place across the country, in every province and territory, and in hundreds of towns and cities, both large and small. From the huge numbers we saw at these strikes, both before and after September, it is clear that youth want meaningful climate justice, and they want the government to deliver.
Climate Strike Canada is the overarching network of students, young people, activists, and allies that connects all of the climate actions surrounding the Canadian youth environmental movement. Some of the recent actions Climate Strike Canada participated in were Shut Down Canada 2020, the Not Going Back campaign, and the Take Back Canada campaign.
In September of this year, Canadian college and university students formed a coalition called the Divest Canada Coalition to pressure educational institutions in Canada to fully divest from the fossil fuel industry. The coalition demands not only full divestment, but that the funds be reinvested in sustainable and just alternatives by 2025.
We want to see the following from the Canadian government.
Implement a Green New Deal, which is a rapid, inclusive, and far-reaching transition to slash emissions, meet the demands of the crises we face, respect the rights of Indigenous peoples, and create over 1 million green jobs.
Implement a Just Recovery, which is a united global response to this COVID-19 pandemic that ensures a just recovery and transition to a better future for those most in need in the wake of the crisis.
Phase out of all fossil fuels. It is vital that Canada do this as soon as possible. An immediate end to fossil fuel subsidies should be the first goal, followed by the phase out of all fossil fuels, including oil, coal, and natural gas. This should be completed by 2030 at the latest.
Implement climate education. Adding the climate crisis and climate-related mental health issues to the education system is important, as children have the right to know that their future is in danger, and we can't let kids grow up sheltered from that reality.
Honor Indigenous people's right to free, prior, and informed consent, as outlined in the United Nations Declaration of the Rights of Indigenous Peoples.
Implement an ecocide law. This would make mass destruction of the environment a crime, which would safeguard climate policies and mean there is no way for corporations to continue their destructive practices. A crime of ecocide is vital to stop the future destruction of the planet. Canada should lead in the introduction of this law, both domestically and internationally.
Overall, the Canadian government needs to get on target to hit or exceed the 2020 and 2030 emission targets.
We call on world leaders to
listen to the science
and treat the climate crisis like the emergency that it is.
Estimadas delegaciones de la MOC COP26, equipo organizador y sociedad civil. Como delegadas y delegados de la conferencia en línea MOC COP26 y en representación de las juventudes de Chile, queremos agradecer de ser partícipes de este evento a nivel mundial y por su confianza en las voces juveniles.
En segundo lugar, creemos que es nuestro deber resaltar la deuda histórica de las últimas conferencias de las Naciones Unidas sobre el cambio climático, respecto al compromiso y desafío que tenemos sobre la actual crisis climática y ecológica. Además, resaltar la constante interferencia de la inactividad e inacción por parte de los países que mayor contribuyen a las emisiones globales y también por la falta de trabajo colaborativo respecto con otras naciones.
Hacemos un llamado a la futura delegación de nuestro país, como las demás a nivel mundial, a la escucha de las juventudes y los pueblos originarios en la COP26 en Glasgow, además de la acción en base a pilares centrales como la ambición, la inclusión y la cooperación, donde todos los compromisos acordados se alineen con los actuales requerimientos de la sociedad civil a nivel local, nacional y global.
Permitiéndonos mitigar nuestro impacto, preocuparnos de las consecuencias del cambio climático, de la explotación de nuestros recursos, de los pueblos originarios y de las actuales y futuras generaciones de nuestro país, además de poder transitar hacia un modelo de desarrollo sostenible que incluya a todos los actores de Chile. A partir de lo anterior, creemos firmemente que se necesitan abarcar las siguientes temáticas como país en la COP26 en Glasgow: participación y voz tanto juvenil como de la sociedad civil, derechos humanos, constitución ecológica, agua y el artículo 6.
Finalmente, queremos ser enfáticos en el compromiso con la región de Latinoamérica y el Caribe, con respecto a la mejoría de las políticas públicas, como el derecho a un desarrollo sostenible y una mayor democracia ambiental. Además, destacamos nuestro profundo interés en el trabajo cooperativo para presionar a las naciones con mayor nivel de emisión a escala global, potenciando la nueva generación de propuestas que logren el cumplimiento de las NDC de Chile y de las partes, respondiendo así a la necesidad que tenemos como país ante la urgencia climática.
Colombia es el país más biodiverso por kilómetro cuadrado del mundo.
En un área que representa solo el 0.7% de la superficie terrestre,
albergamos alrededor del 10% de la diversidad biológica de todo el planeta.
Además, 14 de cada 100 especies encontradas en nuestro territorio no se encuentran en ningún otro lado del mundo.
Existen 91 tipos de ecosistemas que regulan el clima local y global, fundamental en el contexto del cambio climático.
Y de los cuales alrededor del 50% se encuentran en alguna categoría de amenaza.
Si bien Colombia no contribuye a gran medida a la producción de gases de efecto invernadero, esta sí se ve afectada por ellos. Lo vemos en ejemplos como el derretimiento acelerado de los nevados y glaciares, pérdida de diversidad biológica, afectación de población tanto rural como costera, devastación de páramos con pérdida de fuentes y cursos de agua, incremento en deslizamientos e inundaciones, mayor desertificación e incidencia de fenómenos climáticos extremos y reducción de la productividad agropecuaria.
Precisamente, en los últimos días, el 98% de una de las islas más representativas del Caribe colombiano fue arrasada por el primer huracán categoría 5 que golpea las costas de nuestro país. Esto dejando en evidencia la falta de planeación territorial y la incapacidad de adaptar nuestro territorio por parte de las autoridades al cambio climático.
El cambio climático golpea a las poblaciones más pobres y por ende vulnerables del planeta. Los países en desarrollo tendremos que pagar cerca del 75% de los costos del impacto del cambio climático, a pesar de que la mitad más pobre de la población mundial es responsable de solamente el 10% de las emisiones de dióxido de carbono. Somos las y los jóvenes colombianos y en general del sur global quienes comprobamos y viviremos esos estragos, ya que más del 80% de los jóvenes del mundo vivimos en países en vías de desarrollo. Estas marcadas diferencias con el norte hacen que nuestra prioridad de caras a las consecuencias de la crisis climática sea la adaptación a ella, para que no ahonde mucho más en nuestras profundas brechas socioeconómicas.
Las juventudes en Colombia tenemos el reto histórico de construir una sociedad en paz que no solamente supere los estragos producidos por más de medio siglo de conflicto, sino que también supere los estragos que se han producido y se producirán gracias a esta crisis climática. Somos la última generación que puede hacer algo al respecto. De la misma forma, exigimos que se nos garantice el ejercicio seguro de escucha de nuestras demandas y no se ponga en riesgo nuestras vidas. Somos el país más peligroso del mundo para ser un líder socioambiental.
Consideramos que la COP no ha representado las necesidades de los países del sur global como Colombia. Mientras tanto, los responsables de la crisis climática se han beneficiado moderando el debate. Las cualidades de países como Colombia dejan claro que nuestra mayor exigencia debe encaminarse a tener mayor ambición en términos de adaptación, sobre todo con los y las jóvenes del sur global presentes.
Somos hijos e hijas de la guerra
y herederos de la crisis climática.
Y seremos quienes cambien el destino
que nos quieren imponer.
Hello, distinguished delegates and observers. Costa Rica is a Central American country with roughly 5 million people, worldwide recognized for our environmental leadership. Despite small territory, it has 6.5% of the global biodiversity and is the first tropical country to have stopped and reverse deforestation. 98% of the electricity comes from renewable sources, and our goal is to achieve zero net emissions by 2050. Despite all these efforts, we suffer the negative impacts of climate change firsthand due to our geographical location in the global south. People already burdened by poverty, and those highly dependent on agriculture and fishing are the most affected. Scientists warned that significant parts of our territory will disappear completely because of the melting of the poles. In the last month, the country has suffered collateral damage of 2 hurricanes that hit the Central American region, devastating rural settlements and coastlines, taking human lives and causing severe economic losses. In a time when our people demand access to adequate and reliable environmental information, along with more and better opportunities to participate in a meaningful way in the decisions that affect us, the Congress has delayed the ratification process of the Escazú Agreement. We struggle with environmental problems as a lack of clean technologies, poor waste management, and unsustainable monocultures that threat our environment and human health. Costa Rica consumes more agrochemicals per hectare than any country in the world. The European community is still selling us pesticides that have already been banned in their own countries. Regardless of the massive vulnerability to climate change hazards, a powerful and influential minority with particular economic interests is trying to establish extractivist practices such as oil and gas extraction, mining, and bottom trawling, excusing them with the creation of employment to face the economic crisis aggravated by the pandemic. There is a big gap between the country's commitments with the Paris Agreement and the political decisions for economic reactivation. Nevertheless, the economic and social consequences of environmental destruction will dramatically increase poverty. Therefore, the young people of Costa Rica exhort the government to develop mechanisms to link the environmental issues with the economy and social development. We demand for policies based on human rights and risk reduction, with an effective citizen participation in negotiations and decision-making processes with expert and multidisciplinary guidance. It is time to build a country plan that prioritizes the mainstreaming of environmental actions in our productive, economic, and social processes as a human right, improving technology, assuring environmental education in all levels, promoting green, blue, and circular economies, and fostering sustainable livelihoods in a healthy environment. We need new policies that leave no one behind, putting people at the center of climate action, ensuring a just transition to a new climate economy.
Distinguished delegates and observers of the mock COP26, I proudly represent the youth of Dominica, a small tropical island in the Caribbean with a population of 72,050 people. The Kalinago, the indigenous people of Dominica, make up about 2% of that population. Here in Dominica, we are already experiencing the effects of climate change. Increased global temperatures have led to more intense storms with more rainfall. In 2015, an entire village was displaced due to major landslides during a tropical depression. 2 years later, a catastrophic hurricane ravaged our island. Hurricane Maria caused a loss of approximately 226% of GDP. Our tourism industry is under threat, as is the fisheries sector. Dominica is known as the nature isle of the Caribbean, and for the most part, that is always considered. The climate is a common topic on youth-led media programs as we strive to increase awareness on climate change. The Dominica Youth Environmental Organization, DYEO, is, however, the only national youth-led environmental organization in Dominica. In collaboration with other NGOs, DYEO coordinates events and programs aiming to encourage and enhance the involvement of youth in the preservation of the natural environment. On August 14, 2017, the non-state actors NSA of Dominica met at a workshop organized by DYEO in collaboration with the NSA Advisory Panel to deliberate on the impacts of climate change. Dominica was also represented in COP24. The government of Dominica has accepted that climate change is real, and under the Climate Resilient Act committed to establishing an executive agency, the Climate Resilient Execution Agency of Dominica, CREAD, in order to rebuild Dominica as the first climate resilient nation in accordance with a single, resilient, and recovery plan. Dominicans are aware of climate change, and the youth would like to call on the government to mandate all national works executed to remain in congruence with the obligations of the UNFCCC and to establish a system of rewards for the various sectors in compliance. To promote and finance appropriate educational programs in schools on climate change and to build an information center with relevant data. To set up a multifaceted commission to map out strategies, develop white papers, and create an enabling environment for gathering and disseminating information on national developments relating to climate change. To give support to entities involved in climate change endeavors and to continue to promote projects that will reduce the use of fossil fuels. To adhere to the Cotonou Agreement. We have established that climate change is real. Now we need to move quickly in order for plans of reducing the impact of climate change to be effective.
We kindly salute all delegates and observers of mock COP26. We speak to you today representing the youth of the Dominican Republic, a nation located on an exuberant island in the Caribbean shared with Haiti, with a population of approximately 10 million people.
The climate crisis is a global phenomenon. Shukla and collaborators shown that anthropogenic activities involving a change of land use for agriculture and poultry have contributed to the increase of land erosion and desertification, greenhouse gas emissions, and as a consequence, an increase in global temperature from such gases.
At a national level, the unsustainable use of resources with practices like intensive fishing, dysfunctional forestry, and agriculture have contributed to the effects of climate change.
In the Dominican Republic, the analysis of vulnerability on climate change shows that 40% of the country have levels of vulnerability that go from high to very high. This can affect severely the population with events like higher frequency of storms, risk of floods, heat waves, severe droughts, and the appearance of emergent diseases and viruses. The youth of the Dominican Republic has taken important steps to battle climate change. Actions toward recycling, waste management, and the use of low-impact materials have increased over the years. Young people, through some initiatives, have contributed to increasing the resilience of vulnerable communities who live in zones of greater exposure to climate change effects.
We expect the government to decrease inequity in order to increase the livelihood and resilience of vulnerable communities in areas with higher exposure levels to climate change effects.
Climate change is our root and our present, and so is the youth.
In a direction of action and change, we can say that it's never too late to take the wheels of society and drive them to a more sustainable future. Gracias.
Delegación de la República Dominicana.
Climate change located as an historical moment without precedents, and in this complex challenge, education is the goal. Moreover, we request to push up a deep research to know how to face the crisis of our territory, as well as we need to have a constant updating and democratization of solutions. For this problem to be a tool of the sustainability and regeneration pathway, we also need a pedagogical innovation to generate consciousness about the consequence of global warming, curiosity about the nature around us, and interest in this climate emergency to promote the transformation of our actions to the future.
Because of the general crisis and a progressive way of climate change, we try again to create a dialogue circle for exposing our claims because of the population demands on the World and Ecuadorian Scientific Forum to take the measures and to regulate and benefit the human communities influence decreasing in the climate change. This initiative about the climate change and the societies and the ecosystem influence is called climate justice. Climate justice says we must to allow a deal between first world nations with higher pollutant and greenhouse gases production levels because of the scientific and research data that allow us understand the physical evidence in undeveloped countries. Through the scientific talent and information of local territories, we can explain and urge the progress of the greenhouse effect.
Indigenous people and nationalities close ties to the planet, and for millions of years we managed to protect it in an impressive way. However, climate injustice have brought intolerable facts with them. Many communities have been forced to abandon their lands with no date of return, and if immediate reforms that guarantee social justice are not proposed, none if the facts will change. In this sense, we demand the protection of the human rights of environmental defenders. Ecuador is a country with great biodiversity with political anti-theism commitment. We can can be a benchmark in the fight against climate change. Education and climate justice must be the engines of transformation, and education for transformation and science-based and planned energy transition, promoting a transition from the extractivist economy of the global south and respecting diversity and human rights. We will make it.
We will be tireless in the fight to achieve a more human and ecological world.
Hello distinguished delegates and observers of mock COP26. I am Rahim and this is Renata. We are pleased to join you today to represent the youth of the beautiful tropical island of Grenada, located in the southeastern Caribbean Sea with a population of 112,000. As a small island developing state, Grenada is faced with the real and severe negative challenges of climate change, which has placed a burden on the country's economy for at least 20 years. Water and food security, coastal issues, and natural disasters have already affected Grenada. By 2050, it is projected that our capital and our airport and our main beach will be underwater. In 2004, Grenada was plagued by the devastating impacts of Hurricane Ivan, destroying homes, damaging infrastructure, and obliterating our agriculture. This hurricane wrecked our country's economy. Many of our export crops, such as nutmeg, were destroyed. The financial cost of Hurricane Ivan caused over 200% of the country's GDP in damage and destroyed 90% of homes. Imagine if 90% of Scotland was destroyed in a 24-hour period and damages cost 200% of their GDP. We are bound to the motto 1.5 to stay alive.
The effects of climate change in Grenada affect the entire island. Thus, international climate action is essential for us. For our nationally determined contributions, Grenada has committed to reduce 40% of 2010 greenhouse gas emissions by 2030. Thus, the government of Grenada, with youth input and advice, should concentrate on tackling the following areas: to take initiative to reduce fossil fuel consumption and carbon emissions by following through on our NDCs in areas of renewable energy, to commit to prioritizing environmental sustainability in our developmental process, the proper implementation of a system to strengthen the country's water supply against drought, and insist on substantial financing assistance from international institutions in order to be able to effectively carry out these essential initiatives. The youth in Grenada are starting to rally and call on our leadership to urgently address these needs because they will affect our future quality of life. Our youth has taken initiative to participate in project proposal workshops, climate resilient workshops, climate debates, and climate strikes, just to name a few. We believe we have done the best we can given the resources that we have. Now we are asking our government to step up and give us the spaces we need to become a significant part of the conversation. Young people around the world, we need your help to advocate for change. We need your support to make your governments and world leaders understand what is happening in countries like Grenada. We cannot do this alone. We need you, our allies, to fight for our right to continue to safely live on our beautiful island. As youth of Grenada, we have already in our short lives seen the effects of climate change. We call upon the incoming president for COP26 to help guide the negotiations so that we in the Caribbean can stay alive. We thank you.
Honorable delegates and observers of the mock COP26. Hoy les hablo en representación de las juventudes del país de la eterna primavera, Guatemala. Un país con millones de habitantes ubicado en América Central, es pluricultural, multilingüe y con diversidad de recursos naturales. A pesar de ser un país lleno de hermosos lugares turísticos, animales exóticos y que cuenta con 360 microclimas compuesto de la topografía, humedad, temperatura, altitud, luz y cobertura vegetal de sus diferentes territorios, es un país con poca conciencia ambiental. Guatemala es uno de los países más vulnerables a los efectos del cambio climático. Se encuentra en los primeros lugares de asesinatos de los defensores del medio ambiente según Global Witness. Un ejemplo de esto es que en 2018 Guatemala quintuplicó el número de asesinatos. Actualmente se conocen 29 casos, entre muchos otros, de conflictos ambientales relacionados con megaproyectos turísticos, extracción de petróleo en áreas protegidas, ecocidios, monocultivos, centrales hidroeléctricas, mala gestión de residuos, conflictos industriales, así como conflictos por la biodiversidad y conservación que atentan contra la degradación del medio ambiente. No es nada nuevo que en Guatemala existan muchos grandes proyectos que han violado los derechos humanos y las condiciones de vida de muchos guatemaltecos. Podemos mencionar dos de los muchos casos: la resistencia pacífica La Puya, en la que desde 2012 las comunidades mayas Cachiquel de San Pedro Ayampuc y San José del Golfo se han opuesto a un proyecto de extracción de oro, por el cual no fueron consultados y por el cual muchos se han encontrado deficiencias y errores en la evaluación de impacto ambiental. Otro caso es la criminalización de Bernardo Cal, líder indígena maya quechí, quien ha sido encarcelado injustamente durante 2 años por liderar la defensa del territorio frente a proyectos hidroeléctricos que han traído violencia, pérdida de agua, biodiversidad y medios de vida de las comunidades de Santa María Caobón, Altaverapaz. A nivel internacional, Guatemala es considerada como región de reserva ecológica. Además, ocupa el segundo pulmón de América como mayor productor de oxígeno después de Brasil, por sus extensas selvas tropicales. Las diferentes comunidades que abarcan grandes áreas geográficas poseen la más grande biodiversidad genérica de América Central, que proveen servicios ecosistémicos y absorben grandes cantidades de carbono en beneficio de la humanidad. Por eso, hoy le exijo al gobierno de la República de Guatemala el actuar ante las condiciones climáticas que afectan el país, tomar medidas inmediatas basadas en la ciencia y abordar las áreas mencionadas anteriormente. Además, la protección de los pueblos originarios y su reconocimiento estatal, pues son ellos quienes son los guardianes de la Madre Tierra. Además, exigimos la ratificación del Acuerdo de Escazú y su implementación en las leyes internas del país. Como delegado de la Juventud Guatemalteca, esperamos que nuestro gobierno comience a aceptar esta responsabilidad y actuar. Gracias.
A pleasant day, everyone. My name is Safin Allen, and myself, along with Nkofi Hodge, are the delegates for Guyana at the COP26. And I would like to present to you now the high-level video for Guyana. So a little bit about Guyana. Guyana is about 215,000 km in size and lies on the northern shore of South America. Considered a Caribbean country due to its historical and political, along with cultural ties to the countries in the Caribbean, Guyana sits firmly in South America and is bordered by Venezuela to the west, Brazil to the south, Suriname to the east, and the Atlantic Ocean to the north. Guyana is considered a net carbon sink due to its low carbon emissions and vast virgin forests. This, however, does not prevent us from feeling the impacts of climate change. 80% of Guyana's population and our entire agricultural sector is on a low coastal plain, which sits several meters below sea level. This puts Guyana at risk for flooding and frequent inundation from overtopping. The youth movement in Guyana is a critical component in the fight against climate change. More young people are becoming cognizant of environmental issues that arise due to climate change. There is a lot of work to be done. The next frontier is to understand the long-term effects of certain actions for climate and environment that relate to Guyanese. Luckily, our leaders have promised to tackle these issues and also the ones that concern biodiversity and land and environmental degradation. Guyana has made tremendous strides in the fight against climate change. With the implementation of the low-carbon development strategy, we have secured substantial amounts of resources from the Norwegian government for activities to reduce our greenhouse gas emissions. However, this might not be enough to create a climate-resilient economy. With financing specifically for climate action, we can improve our monitoring, verification, and reporting system, not just for the forestry sector, but for all sectors such as mining and transportation, which contributes tremendously to our greenhouse gas generation. These types of financing for developing countries are not easily accessed. As a youth of Guyana and of the world, we have a tremendous responsibility to protect our future. For some of us, the older generation, even with all the pressures of the world, are not and will not act at all or quickly enough to keep global temperatures below 1.5 degrees Celsius rise. We need to take action now because there might not be another chance we are given to make decisions to shape our future. If opportunities not exist, we should create them. Thank you.
Scolaire et universitaire. Au niveau international, nous demandons aux instances concernées d'appliquer une vraie justice climatique envers Haïti, car il est anormal pour un pays qui ne produit que 0,91 tonnes de CO2 par habitant de payer les conséquences des travaux des grands pollueurs. Deuxièmement, nous demandons aux instances internationales de nous favoriser l'accès à des technologies rationnellement écologiques dans le cadre du processus d'adaptation. Troisièmement, nous aimerions voir un relâchement des technologies brevetées afin que nous puissions réellement avoir accès aux connaissances et aux technologies en matière d'adaptation. Nous aimerions demander à la CCNUCC alors de prendre en considération nos doléances dans les négociations internationales, car nous ne voulons plus être une goutte d'eau dans un océan. Je voudrais terminer tout en recommandant à tous les jeunes du monde entier à se joindre à nous, car la lutte contre les changements climatiques est collective et doit être inclusive. Je voudrais demander également aux instances internationales concernées de repenser les modes de production, de repenser les systèmes. Ce n'est pas le climat qu'il faut changer, mais c'est plutôt ce système capitaliste destructeur de la planète. Chers leaders du monde entier, vos financements ne suffisent pas. Si nous ne pouvons pas réellement avoir accès aux technologies faibles en émissions, vos financements ne suffisent pas. Mais si ceux qui nous financent continuent à polluer. Les changements climatiques nous mettent tous dans une impasse. Et pour s'en sortir, on doit utiliser sans discrimination tous les moyens que nous avons à notre disposition. On ne peut pas combattre les changements climatiques sans l'inclusion de tous, sans la participation de tous et sans des solutions basées sur la nature. Ensemble, nous pouvons concrétiser ce rêve de voir une planète saine et viable. Merci beaucoup.
Honorables delegados, excelencias y observadores, esta declaración es presentada en nombre de 4.8 millones de jóvenes de nuestro país, representando cerca del 50% de nuestra población. Honduras, por su posición geográfica, es uno de los países más vulnerables ante los efectos de cambio climático, especialmente ante los fenómenos meteorológicos. En años anteriores, prolongadas sequías han afectado a cerca de 3.5 millones de pobladores, además del 50% del sector agroindustrial. En años recientes, tormentas como ETA y huracán Iota han desplazado y afectado a cerca de 3.5 millones de pobladores, 500.200 pérdidas de hectáreas de bosque, una creciente enfermedades vectoriales y además afección al sector ganadero han provocado pérdidas financieras, inseguridad alimentaria y una creciente migración.
Pedimos a nuestros gobiernos que según su capacidad adopten medidas para cumplir una trayectoria de emisiones consistente con la limitación de aumento de la temperatura global a 1,5 grados por encima de los niveles preindustriales y a participar en un proceso de negociación internacional justo en el marco de la Convención de las Naciones Unidas sobre el Cambio Climático. Hacemos un llamado a una adecuada integración y participación significativa, especialmente de los jóvenes, con contribuciones nacionales determinadas, planes de desarrollo y políticas públicas. Solicitamos enfáticamente que la seguridad y las libertades civiles de los defensores de los derechos humanos, los defensores del medio ambiente y los defensores de la justicia social sean mantenidas y sean respetadas por todas las partes e instituciones.
En segundo lugar, hacemos un llamado a las organizaciones sociales y partes interesadas a liderar con su ejemplo a través de la implementación de políticas de sustentabilidad y desinversión de los combustibles fósiles. Además, animamos a continuar con su abogacía para incrementar la transparencia en torno al alcance de las empresas de energía no renovable y combustibles
al sector no gubernamental, universidades y facultades, para integrar cambio climático, la sostenibilidad organizacional y nuestro rol en la adaptación y mitigación en planes de estudio, investigación y en programas de desarrollo de capacidades.
Implementar políticas para la participación proactiva de universidades en estrategias de adaptación y mitigación a través de reciclaje, construcción de edificios ecológicos y accesibilidad a transporte y alimentación sostenible. Destacamos la importancia de la equidad intergeneracional y la integración de un enfoque basado en derechos en la acción climática. Creemos que los jóvenes deben de estar en el centro de las negociaciones y conversaciones. Ha llegado el momento de enmendar los errores del pasado y tomar acciones por un futuro más saludable, un planeta más saludable. Gracias.
Invitados, damas y caballeros, el día de hoy nos presentamos en representación de las juventudes mexicanas.
Mexico is a developing Latin American country with a population of 126.2 million people. It is one of the world's leaders in biodiversity and multiculturalism. We were one of the first countries to ratify the Paris Agreement and submit its NDCs in 2015. Historically, we've been part of numerous international agreements. Therefore, as youth, we're committed to continue promoting multilateral cooperation in order to successfully accomplish the Sustainable Development Goals and the Paris Agreement targets.
In Mexico, we are already experiencing the effects of climate change. Mexico's temperature has already increased between 1.2 and 1.7 degrees during the last decade. This drastic change has led to a higher intensity and quantity of floods, desertification, and hurricanes. The latter occurs due to the imbalance of our country's ecosystems and biodiversity. One of their most important functions are acting as a natural barrier against infectious diseases such as COVID-19.
In the National Youth Survey on Climate Change implemented by the Mexican delegation to more than 1,000 young people, 97% considered that the climate change has an important impact on their lives. In the last year, 25% have been affected by a climate-related disaster. 44% said that their health has been affected by the climate crisis, and 95% have experienced negative feelings such as anxiety, frustration, powerlessness, or anger.
Even as a developing country, Mexico was part of the top 10 greenhouse gas emitters in 2017. Despite the vulnerability our country is facing against the climate crisis, Mexico's lack of political will and environmental policies is increasing. This can be visualized in the government's actions towards the construction of the Dos Bocas oil refinery, the refurbishment of the 6 oil refineries, and the extraction of non-conventional sources of hydrocarbons.
We as youth are constantly told that we're the future, but in reality our worries, interests and proposals are rarely taken into account. We are narrowed to be spectators of a natural world that writes our story and destroys our hope. Fortunately, that is already changing. We are beginning to raise our voices and demand our decision makers to wake up and act now.
More than 13,200 young people across the country took part in climate strikes in September 2019, and there are many youth-led campaigns demanding change.
Furthermore, 99% of surveyed young people consider the government is not acting accordingly in order to tackle climate change on time.
Delegates were among a group of young people whose desire and passion for change is undying. Youth that sees the effort of those that came before them, carries their legacy, and with that we have made our own. Here's to the generation that knows what they deserve. Thank you.
Hola, soy Ana Díaz Peña y es una satisfacción para mí ser una de las delegadas en representación de la juventud de Paraguay, un país sudamericano. Extendemos un cordial saludo a las distinguidas delegaciones y espectadores del MOOC COP26. Nuestro país está gravemente perjudicado por los efectos de la alteración climática, atravesando sequías prolongadas, ocasionales ciclones, temperaturas elevadas, incendios forestales y descensos históricos de cauces hídricos. En ese mismo contexto, es necesario enfatizar que los sectores mayormente desfavorecidos son los pueblos originarios y poblaciones minoritarias. A causa de la deforestación y erosión del suelo para posterior producción agroganadera y monocultivo de soja transgénica, comunidades enteras cumplen la obligación de desplazarse de sus territorios o convivir con el poderoso enemigo de la repercusión de los agrotóxicos, reincidiendo en la vulneración de sus derechos humanos básicos. Por otra parte, los jóvenes se han comprometido a promover la conciencia socioambiental y el activismo en contra de la degradación de la biodiversidad a través de militancias, huelgas digitales y presenciales y espacios de debate sobre materia ambiental. Desde el 2011, Paraguay cuenta con una política nacional de cambio climático y con estrategias sobre la mitigación y adaptación de los efectos del clima. Sin embargo, nuestro país es altamente vulnerable frente a la problemática mencionada, evitando el cumplimiento de la ley planteada. Es urgente que nuestras autoridades examinen e implementen métodos estratégicos de solución y resiliencia a los impactos del cambio climático. Asimismo, es necesario reformar e instaurar un sistema educativo en el cual los niños y jóvenes aprendan sobre la gravedad y la base científica de la crisis climática, logrando así que las instituciones reflejen el principio de sostenibilidad. Paralelamente, la justicia climática es un asunto omitido en Paraguay. Esto nos impulsa a exigir el esclarecimiento de casos ilícitos en aspectos socioambientales, así como la ratificación del Acuerdo de Escazú. El momento de la acción climática es ahora, ya no existe un después. Por ello buscamos el compromiso de los niños, niñas y jóvenes a exhortar a los gobiernos el cumplimiento de los compromisos asumidos sobre las contribuciones nacionales determinadas y articular iniciativas que eduquen y concienticen a las personas en el ámbito nacional e internacional, ya que con la ausencia de políticas públicas perderemos la lucha frente a la crisis climática como miembros de una humanidad que no movilizó las estrategias necesarias para salvaguardar nuestra propia vida. Gracias.
Hi everyone, we are the delegates of Peru for this mock COP26. As you may know, Peru is located in the western region of South America, and we are a very unique country as we are among one of the only countries to have 3 different regions: the coast, the highlands, and of course the rainforest.
Our participation in events like this is very important, considering that we constantly suffer from the effects of climate change. Natural disasters such as flooding, droughts, and landslides have affected our people and lands. Our Amazon rainforest is under attack and is constantly being tried by problems such as mass deforestation, cattle grazing, and illegal mining. Our highlands are affected by the glacial retreat infested in our snow-capped mountains.
The Peruvian youth is becoming aware of these issues as we begin to raise our voices for change. Organizations such as Fridays for Future have organized manifestations with the goal of inciting our government to take action. Taking into consideration our recent political crisis, we have seen how much of an impact we have on our government and the decisions being made. Our voices have been heard for the first time in decades, and we will not remain silent again.
Through our work as climate activists, Peru has achieved to create central goals regarding adaptation and mitigation of climate change. Moreover, Peru has looked towards being more inclusive in its measures and dialogues of climate change. Right now, we are looking towards creating a better and more efficient climate education for our population to be more conscious and aware of what is going on and to be motivated to take action.
Another point to be made is the improvement of climate justice. In Peru, there are laws related to environmental litigation, illegal mining, and other new ones related to climate change. However, there is no authority that regulates whether these laws are enforced or not. With our participation, we seek to establish mechanics for its compliance.
For our country to do a better job, we ask for the youth to be involved in the decision-making of climate policies. In the end, we are the ones that will have to live in this planet in the future, and we should be respected and taken into account.
We are proud to participate in this mock COP26.
Distinguished delegates and observers of mock COP26, greetings. Today I am representing the youth of St. Kitts and Nevis, a small dual island federation nestled within the northern gems of the Caribbean archipelago, with a population of just over 50,000. Here in St. Kitts and Nevis, the climate realities can no longer be ignored. As a small island developing state, we are particularly faced by rises in temperatures and rises in sea levels. The increased temperature trends have led to intensified and extended drought periods, affecting our agricultural production, which is mostly dependent on rainfall water. Compounding the situation is the onset of strengthened hurricanes at increased frequencies. With over 60% of the population residing in coastal areas and a significant coastal tourism sector, the country is significantly vulnerable to sea level rise and the threats of accelerated coastal erosion and flooding. The youth of St. Kitts and Nevis are largely nescient of the realities our country faces. Despite this, are some youth-based environmental groups such as the one I am representing, the Caribbean Youth Environment Network in St. Kitts and Nevis. Together, these groups work together to perform awareness and action-driven projects that are sustainable and match local and international targets. Thousands of youth have been engaged in their projects to increase the citizenry's awareness that the fans of climate change have already clamped down on our world. My country proposed an emissions reduction target of 22% and 35% of our greenhouse gas emissions projected in the business as usual scenario for 2025 and 2030 respectively. However, although actionable, I believe further steps can be taken. I'm imploring that our government look into directly injecting climate education as an independent mandatory subject into our curriculum as they review our education system. Furthermore, I suggest implementing projects to develop climate-smart communities that can be used as a global model. As a proud youth of local soil who have experienced climate change firsthand, I am demanding that our government take immediate action and address the concerns aforementioned. Climate change is real, and playing peekaboo only exacerbates the situation. As greenhouse gases and temperatures rise, so must our ambition and drive to make aggressive but targeted steps backed by science to curb the crisis. We have already paid for lack of action with our lives. Our descendants should not. Thank you.
Greetings and salutations, distinguished delegates and observers of COP26. I speak to you representing the youth of Suriname, a country which lies on the northeastern Atlantic coast of South America, bordering with Guyana to the west, French Guyana to the east, and Brazil to the south. The country has a tropical climate of semi-humid type with 4 seasons. Suriname is particularly vulnerable to the impacts of climate change. The country's small population, major economic activities, and infrastructure are concentrated along the low-lying, heavily urbanized coastal zone. The country has already experienced coastal erosion and has suffered damages from heavy rainfall, flooding, higher temperatures during dry seasons, and high winds. Climate change has a significant impact on the sustainable development of Suriname. Up till today, there are many youth-led organizations in Suriname taking actions against climate change. More than 1,000 youngsters participated in various projects such as tree planting, cleanup days, and climate awareness campaigns. The youth of Suriname is convinced that the government should improve its target of being a high forest cover and low deforestation country committed to maintaining 93% of its forest cover. We hereby pledge to our government to implement climate education as well as enhance its legislations in the forestry, mining, and agriculture sector. Suriname's primary old-growth tropical forests are of global importance, not only in terms of forest carbon, but also because of the interconnectedness of biodiversity, forest conservation, and climate change. In order to effectively achieve this, We also pledge to the international community to acknowledge the significant contribution that Suriname provides to the global response against climate change and provide adequate financial support to maintain this treasure. Thank you.
Hello, distinguished delegates and observers of MOCOP. I humbly speak to you today representing the youth of Trinidad and Tobago, a small tropical island republic in the Caribbean Sea with a population of 1.3 million people and a wealth of natural resources. Small island developing states like TNT are already experiencing the effects of climate change. Our coastlines are receding, coral bleaching is happening in beautiful Tobago. Our seasons are dry with erratic rain, making it difficult for agriculture and wildlife to survive. The days are now blisteringly hot and are a nightmare in most schools, office buildings, and residential homes, given that they are designed for ambient temperatures of past times. In TNT, we are out of reach of the Caribbean hurricane path due to the nature of the ITCZ. However, low-lying or badly drained areas are still plagued by flooding, leading to loss of life and infrastructure and proliferation of waterborne diseases. It demonstrates inefficient watershed management, badly regulated land use, and poor waste management. The youth of TNT are conscious of the lackluster efforts to adapt to the future. They have participated in marches in the capital city. They have spoken out on social media and to our politicians, and they have created their own civil society organizations to coordinate and represent the mission for a sustainable future. Many aspects of sustainable development are covered, from the humblest beach cleanups to vigorous campaigning to the government. Sitting idly is not an option at this point. We refuse to inherit a foggy, lifeless imitation of a developed society. TNT currently aims to reduce emissions by 15% by 2030 through the implementation of renewable energy and energy efficiency means, together with moves to improve public transport, such as increasing the amount of CNG maxi taxis. This is notable given TNT's status as the second highest carbon dioxide emitter per capita in 2019, according to the World Bank. We, the decision makers of tomorrow, want to see efforts to achieve this NDC fast-tracked. Diversification of the economy is necessary to ensure that TNT adapts, but also as new citizens emerge as leaders and consumers that have learned the knowledge to make better choices. Climate education is sporadic among schools. It appears as being dependent on the whims of each school's budget, and individual priorities at schools are primarily done by CSO's inputs. Standardizing climate, environmental, and sustainable development education across the education system should be a top priority to empower students and ensure the exposure to basic background science and how they can take action on all scales. The old system needs to modernize to meet the needs of changing economies and even future types of work in various fields besides the emergence of green jobs. I wish to remind the leaders in TNT that fossil fuels are being phased out globally. Also, that food needs to take center stage as food insecurity is a dominant city issue. We need support for small and medium-sized enterprises. The youth of TNT are the inheritors of this country in whatever condition it's passed on. The consequences of reactive government affect the entire country, and we demand that our leaders accept the responsibility to implement steps for long-lasting, drastic change that we all need to live free and healthy. Thank you.
Hello, distinguished delegates and observers of Mock COP26. We are speaking to you today representing the youth of the United States. We believe that as a nation, we have the most responsibility to address climate change, given that we've historically emitted more greenhouse gases than any other country. In 2020 alone, over 13,000 Americans lost their homes in the West Coast wildfires, one of many exacerbated natural disasters worsened by the emission of greenhouse gases. Additionally, there have been 12 named tropical storms so far just this past year. Subsequently, many people have lost their homes and livelihoods. Unfortunately, we as young people recognize that our leadership has chronically failed to make drastic changes needed to confront the climate crisis. Recent administrations have not given the crisis enough attention, even undermining current efforts by withdrawing from the Paris Agreement and propping up fossil fuels.
The good news is, youth are organizing in mass numbers in order to demand the drastic action we need. We've taken matters into our own hands because our future depends on it. However, we know that we need our nation's leaders to step up as well. We ask our leaders to mandate climate education in order to inform the next generation on climate science. The climate crisis has already taken a major toll on people's well-being. Physical health is threatened by factors such as poor air quality.
We must also overhaul our current food system, given how it worsens climate change. Thus, We must facilitate a swift transition to sustainable agriculture nationwide and support regenerative practices. Furthermore, it is critical that we account for frontline and vulnerable communities. Our leaders must ensure that minorities have access to critical resources such as disaster support and clean water. Additionally, policymakers must provide a just transition and a federal jobs guarantee for all affected workers.
While we agree to a 28% decrease in emissions by 2025 below 2005 levels in Paris, young people would actually like to see a 75% reduction by 2030 and achieve net zero by 2040. For that, we need to enact a portfolio of aggressive policies across every sector that rise in stringency over time. We also like to greatly increase our contribution to the Green Climate Fund in order to help developing countries with mitigation and adaptation. Once the new administration takes office, we'd like to see more aggressive GHG reduction targets set everywhere else as well. Additionally, we urge other first world countries to do more to financially help developing countries with adopting renewable energy. We also advise other first world countries to strongly consider enacting carbon tariffs on imports as a new global compliance mechanism. All this definitely won't be easy. However, we believe that a sustainable emission-free future is not only possible but necessary for the benefit of future generations. So let's all do what it takes to make that future a reality. Thank you.
Estimados delegados, distinguidos observadores e invitados de la COP26. Hoy tenemos el honor de formar parte de la delegación venezolana en representación de todos los jóvenes de Venezuela ante este importante encuentro. Venezuela es un país situado en América del Sur que cuenta con una ubicación geográfica que le concede una gran diversidad, principalmente de recursos naturales, hídricos y energéticos, así como de una biodiversidad que hoy se encuentra en peligro. Venezuela hoy enfrenta un ecocidio. Durante los últimos 20 años, la discusión acerca del cambio climático y el desarrollo sostenible ha marcado la pauta en las relaciones multilaterales de los estados y organismos de la región de América Latina. A partir de la proclamación de los Objetivos de Desarrollo del Milenio de 1999 y de la firma de la Carta Interamericana de la Organización de los Estados Americanos, la cual incluye al ambiente como prioridad en las democracias de nuestra región, se ha generado un mayor interés en promover un proceso de transformación, promoviendo políticas de sostenibilidad y gestión ambiental. Sin embargo, gran parte de estos esfuerzos han quedado en acuerdos de papel y no en acciones concretas por parte de los estados para avanzar en un proceso que incorpore y defienda los mecanismos de protección ambiental y desarrollo sostenible. Algo por lo que hoy los jóvenes alzamos nuestra voz ante nuestra preocupación por nuestro futuro inmediato. Esta ausencia de acciones concretas y de negligencia por parte del Estado ha llevado a Venezuela a contraer una emergencia climática y que actualmente sigue sin ser visibilizado y reconocido por la ausencia de libertad de prensa y censura que existe en nuestro país. Es por ello que creemos que la educación climática y las políticas públicas de mitigación deben ser una respuesta no solo en Latinoamérica, sino a escala mundial.
Over the past 20 years, the discussion on climate change and sustainable development has set the tone for multilateral relations between state and international organizations in the Latin American region. Since the proclamation of the Millennium Development Goals for United Nations and the signing of the Inter-American Democratic Charter of the Organization of American States, which include the environment has a priority in the democracy of our region. However, much of this effort has been left in paper agreements and not in the concrete action by the state to advance a process that incorporates and defends the mechanisms for environmental protection and sustainable development. The severe climate crisis has increased over the past year with the constant oil spills in Venezuela. Without any response from Venezuela state, with the oil spills generating a serious crisis for the civilian population that is affected by these spills in the daily life, causing a violation of economic, social, and environmental rights in Venezuela. In the face of this, the Young of Venezuela, where students, human rights defenders, and youth organizations across the country have launched an international advocacy to denounce the protests against this serious case of violation of environmental rights in the generation of proposals for sustainable development.